Yeah, right. First time we've had four on the show here, and sorry to everybody who's watching right now, which I don't think is anyone. But yes, we just had to get the technicals going. We're gonna have people watch this after going live here. Not a lot of people seem to want to get up at 6 a.m. and watch, but that's okay. But we are, yeah, this is an extra special show today, and we are both honored and very grateful to have a dear friend of mine on the show here and his dad, whose birthday it is today.
Happy birthday.
So,
Right?
uh, way. And I'll do my best to pronounce their names because I haven't had very much practice with their language and their sounds, but I want to make sure I do my best here to introduce these fine men that are joining us here today. So, um, I'll start first with the birthday boy and Xwestikn. Xwestikn.
Good. That's nice.
Good morning. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Right?
And Xwestikn is also recently, not only is he a dad, not only is he a granddad, but he's also now a great grandfather, which is very cool. So we could talk a little bit about that. That's our, I, I don't know any great grandfathers personally myself. So, and then his son, whose name is a little more, a little more difficult from my mouth, but I'm learning. Um, Nkiochin, Nkiochin. That's still not great, but thank you for otherwise known a little more easily to me as Chief Chad. And so great honor to have you gentlemen here. Um, Maybe we could just start off with, I'll do a bit of an introduction if you guys want, just to give some context about how we've all come together, and then would just love for you guys to introduce yourselves. And I'd like to give you permission to brag a little bit, just to go and, you know, I realize here in Canada, and maybe it's also part of your culture. I know it's also part of my Japanese culture is very a great humbleness, and the four of us are all, knowing all four of us now, we're all very humble men, and it's also part of like this hockey culture where I don't know if you guys have ever seen hockey players when they get interviewed, and you know the interviewer would be like, "Oh, you just scored 10 goals. How do you feel right now?" And then they'll talk about the team, and they'll talk about the goalie, and they'll talk about everybody else, but they never say like, "Yeah, I played a really good game." You don't hear that a lot in Canadian culture. So, anyways, I would love to hear, you guys brag a little bit. But just in terms of context, yeah, Chad and I met how many years ago now?
Six.
6 years on a plane. Well, I'll give it a little bit of context. So both him and I were in Amsterdam, but we didn't know each other. I was there for a Tony Robbins conference. He was there for a very interesting delegation to learn about how specifically Amsterdam, I guess, has developed their city.
We were actually looking at hydro rail development, so hydrogen fuel cell passenger trains we were in a partnership to explore it with UBC Okanagan. Dr. Ford Lovegrove was doing some research and he invited us along. And we also were looking at some of their communities, like their sustainable community development policies.
Yeah, so all stuff I had no idea about. And I remember seeing Chad in the, lineup as we're getting our tickets to get on the plane. And I was like, who's this guy with a cowboy hat on? And I think you might have had cowboy boots on. And just
Yeah.
you stuck out in my mind, and stuck out for me in the lineup. I was like, who's this guy? And then, I don't know how, I don't know why I got the ticket I got or you got the ticket I got. But long story short, both you and I are sitting in the bulkhead row on this 9-hour flight with no one else in this row of seats. And so for 9 hours, we just started talking about hydro rail, which I had no idea about, and all of the ways that, Amsterdam has developed their city, not to mention thousands of years of your stories and people. And so I just was fascinated. I hadn't met anyone that had put themselves at the intersection of so many of these ideas and could speak to them so eloquently. And yeah, so I was just very impressed. And, from that point forward, uh, we became really good friends. So So yeah, that's the context. And Chad wanted to bring his dad on the show as well, which we thought was very, very cool since it's his birthday today. So with that being said, I'd love for you guys to be able to introduce yourselves. And again, please brag a little bit, not like hockey players. And maybe we want to start with Deacon.
Okay, I guess to start with, I like to say white. And the reason we say that, it's a form of greeting and respect. Because if you were in Hawaii, when you got off the plane, you'd be saying aloha, right? And it's just common practice, even though you guys are down there and other First Nations, if you call it that, territory. Here in our territory, we say "way." It's a form of acknowledgement and respect that we give people, because in our culture, you got to give respect to get respect. So we always just say "way." It's just a common thing. Like we don't say "hi" or "bye." We use the word "way." So I just needed to explain that. And my name is Xwestikn, and that's a traditional name that was given to me when I was born. So back in the day in the 40s, that we had about 3 feet of snow, and I was born in the wee hours. Anyway, my grandmother delivered me, and in the morning I was by the fire, and my siblings, they said, "Where did the baby come from?" And my grandmother said, "He was walking on top of the snow, and we caught him and we brought him over here to warm him up by the fire, and now he's going to be you guys' little brother." So my name stuck. Uh, Ever since, my name was Xwestikn, meaning walking on top of the snow, on top of the ice, on top of a crest of a hill. So that's my name. Anyway, I just wanted to explain it, and thanks for letting me introduce myself. Now I'll pass it on to the next person.
Well, thanks, Wistigan. And again, how does it feel today on your birthday? How old are you, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, I'm old enough to know better and young enough to do it again. I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
All right.
I don't like to brag too much about. I don't consider myself old. I think you're only old as you think you are. I can still bend down, touch my toes without bending my knees, and I can still hike around and uh, do a lot of things that people can't do when they were born in the 40s. So I won't mention all the other stuff I can do.
Well, I think you said that you do 10K walks every day,
Well,
hikes.
yeah, we do that because we do that for work. In the forestry, we hike, cut blocks, and look at forestry programs that the proponents are doing. Like corporations are out there harvesting trees, and we're out there making sure with some elders that they don't over harvest, and the kind of harvest that they do are the kind that we recommend.
Right.
So
So you're out there making sure that things are done, properly ecologically to ensure that the forest can continue, the nature that can continue. You're out there. No one else is doing this, right? You're out there making sure that someone's speaking for the land, the trees.
yeah, we speak for the ones that can't speak for themselves. Uh, like we protect the water, we protect the berry picking grounds, we protect the animal corridors and wintering grounds, calving grounds, you name it. We protect it.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible, right? Because if you like, who else would be doing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty simple for our old people. Like speak with on a regular basis with a bunch of elders that, like myself, my first language is the one, not this language that I'm using. My first language is our own language called Enseelchen, because we are the Seal people, and so we meet and we have discussions on about what's going on in our territory, whereas before we never had a voice. Now, because the legal landscape has changed quite considerably in the last few decades, now we can protect the water, we can protect the forest, and make sure that things are not done business as usual, where like no, we don't allow clear cuts. And now, because the legal landscape, we don't, we don't allow them to do any clear cuts.
Yeah,
Without going into detail about
sure.
exactly what we do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that you're doing that because otherwise, well, you already know this. It gets to be a problem if someone isn't having a voice for those that don't have one.
Yeah, well, that's really like reality is, our whole ecosystem is in dire straits because of the global warming, flash floods, these monstrous forest fires, and you name it, that we have all over because of our people not being involved in the way things are have been done.
Yeah.
When
Well, I
I say
appreciate.
when I say our people, I'm talking about our Indigenous people, our knowledge keepers that that carry that knowledge and traditions down through the language. You only carry that if you're a fluent speaker. So I
Yeah.
just want to say that.
Yeah, because your language, as I understand it, and the words and the sounds are very strongly tied to nature, right?
Yeah, it's really tied to the whole ecosystem. Anyway, yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Appreciate that. Appreciate you. All right. I'll try saying it. Stop saying it one more time, and then I'll stop embarrassing myself. I mean, I only speak one language, so I lived overseas for a while in Malta in Europe, and everyone there spoke like five languages, and I was so embarrassed that I could only speak one, and so I always learned to say at least way, like I could at least want to learn the form, how to be polite and respectful, but uh, in Kiochin, um,
Kilochin
say
is
it again, yeah, properly for us.
Kilochin. Why? Glad to be here. Thanks for sharing some space for us to have this chat. And I have appreciated our friendship first and foremost, Ryan, and it's good to be able to share this with you and with my dad. Uh, I know he doesn't like to brag, and we don't like to brag and talk about ourselves. So I think some of the things that stand out for my dad is that he's one of a very small handful of fluent speakers of our language. So our language is critically endangered, and we've been really striving hard to preserve the language, and I'm fortunate enough to work at the Okanagan Center, who has a partnership with the UBC Okanagan, uh, and my dad's sister, who would be my auntie, Dr. Jeanette Armstrong, helped develop the framework for one of the first Indigenous language fluency degree programs in Canada. So, we're really, our family, I think, is really lucky to have um, that kind of connection with our land, our language, and our culture. And they're really, I think, trying to um, we call it knowledge mobility and transfer. They're trying to, I think, share some of the core values around our identity as Seal people, and the changes that are rapidly happening in our in our territory and in our lives with colonization and settlement and relatively new 250 years in the interior here, because we are in the southern interior of British Columbia. If people don't know where the Seal territory is, but otherwise, our people, our nation, our tribe is known as the Okanagan, and that is just because of early misunderstandings and language barriers and miscommunication in that way. But I would say that in liu Xwestikn is Gail Bono from Inkamuplex. My dad is Xwestikn and my mom is Gail from head of the lake on the other side of Okanagan Lake, on the north end of Okanagan Lake. And her mom and dad, my mom's mom and dad was Wilford and Gladys Bono. Her maiden name was Simla, Gladys Simla. And my grandpa's mom and dad was, he was the oldest of 11, I think. And his mom and dad's name were Sarah and Jimmy Bono from head of the lake there. And on my dad's side, my dad's mom, her name was Lillian Louie, originally from Inchlim, Washington, or otherwise known as Kettle Falls. And our family on that side goes back to the last salmon chief before they built all the dams in the Columbia River. And I helped my Uncle Richard with the calling of the salmon ceremony every year. That's been in place since Coyote times. We have a character who shaped and provided some guidance in our what we call our chaptik, which is our stories, our creation stories, our coyote stories about the ways of the land and how we should live here on the land. And then on my dad's side, my dad's name was William Armstrong or Maquella. And when people have passed on, we usually say Tui in front of their names, just as a reference for people to know that they've gone ahead of us. So, and his mom, he was raised by his mom. His dad passed away when he was very young, like 2 years old or something. But his mom was Christine Joseph, and she came from the northern Arrow Lakes. So I introduced myself that way so that you and whoever's going to be watching this kind of gets an idea about where my family comes from and where some of the knowledge comes from throughout, from the land. And I think that's important for me to kind of formally introduce myself in that way. So, I, y- so, so people get a sense of uh, who I am and where my knowledge and my values come from. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of my genealogy and my formal introduction. So I've been pretty privileged in my life to chase a dream. My dad rode a few broncs and, kind of living out in the mountains. Our people were known as horse people and always been around horses, and they turned it into rodeos. So I rode saddle bronc horses. I got on my first when I was 13, got on my first bull when I was 16, and I kind of chased those neon lights and the silver and gold buckles. Way back in '95, I was the Canadian high school saddle bronc champion. Um, 2001, I was the BC bull riding champion, amateur rodeo association here in BC. But I was able to travel all over North America and go to rodeos and bull ridings, and I ended up on the Hamptons one year, in the Hamptons on Labor Day riding bulls. That was kind of cool. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was we were over at the Foxwoods, and over at a big all native gathering over there. They put on a bull ride and a powwow and a golf tournament and a baseball tournament, and it's just it's a it was one of the first Indian casinos in the U.S. So pretty significant in terms of how that kind of resilience, bringing traditions forward in a modern context, and how that can shape the future, through bringing some of the past forward. So, I just want to say thanks to all the people who, put footsteps in front of us through blazing trails like that. So, a former chief for the Penticton Indian Band, counselor and language learner. I think I'm so proud of my dad and how much he shares, especially with that. I don't know the language, again, just being a fluent speaker, and how significant that is, the knowledge that he shares with us in relation to who we are and our culture, but also in our relationship to the land is it's very unique, and I just can't say how proud I am of him enough. So happy birthday, Dad.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Big happy birthday.
One thing I find really fascinating as you guys are introducing yourselves is, like, I know it's so common nowadays in many of, especially the Western cultures, when we introduce ourselves, and we talk about ourselves and what our accomplishments have been, and what, so we think that, if you meet one person, like, you're just meeting that one person. And I know in French Canadian culture, where, like, me growing up in Winnipeg, when I'd introduce myself to somebody in the community, they would always ask, especially if it was an elder or somebody that was, older than me, they would always ask, like, c'est qui ton père? It's like, meaning, like, who's your dad? And so there's, like, the reference to, like, well, I'll know you through who you are in your family, like who your dad is or who your mom is. And I love how as you guys are introducing yourselves, like, it's not just you, it's not just your father or your mother, but it's like generations. And I love that this idea of, like, who we are is, the sum total of everybody that has come before us. And I think there's so much power in, even as an individual, to see that who we are is way more than just us. Like, it's just not, it's me. It's all of my past, all of my history, all of my culture. And I think that's really, really powerful. So I just want to acknowledge that. So thank you guys for sharing.
Yeah, that really stood out for me too, Chad. Like, growing up, I knew very little about my family for various reasons. And I've been on a journey. Who's this?
This is the reason why. The next generation. So I forgot to introduce our kids,
Mm.
but I don't ever forget in any moment, if they're listening or watching this, about how much we love them. They're Satin, William, his partner Brittany, Isa, Waylon, and Emerson.
you've got three of your own, right? And then now also a grand kid.
And two that I claim as mine. The two-step kids, which are amazing boys.
Well, and how's that been for both of you as a now granddad and great granddad?
You're on mute. Take it off of mute.
Oh yeah, I was just watching my grandkids. They're getting ready to go to school here. They have, because we live in a rural area, they got to catch the bus here in about 15 minutes. So I was kind of distracted here for a little while, but I don't know. Being like a grandfather and a great grandfather, like like being a father, you know, you have all these feelings for your children, but when you become a grandfather, it's like 10 times that feeling for your grandchildren. I guess it's a natural thing that happens naturally to people. And I never ever thought I would have, you know, feel like that. You know, I never ever thought about being a grandfather, let alone being a great grandfather, right? I have this 6-year-old great grandchild, and he always refers to me as, you know, that guy that I made great. He tells everybody that because I always tell him every time I see him, I always point at him and I tell him, "You made me great. You made me great. Now I'm a great grandfather." And now he tells everybody, "You know that guy that I made great."
That's awesome.
Anyway, I just wanted to explain some feelings, how different it is. You know, when you have a child you really love and care for that child, but being a great, you know, a grandfather is 10 times that, right? The feeling is tenfold. And it's just kind of crazy. I guess it's just a natural thing. You know, you don't expect it or anything, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. So
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm gonna have to sign off here in about 5 minutes. I gotta drive my kids to the bus stop, my grandkids to the bus stop. So I'll be leaving you guys in about 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your communication too, because you were sharing also that you have a natural wood heating system or two that you need to tend to, and you're also on, but then you've got, you know, natural wood heating, but you're also on Starlink because of where you live.
Yeah, we live in a rural area. Of course, we got horses, we got a milk cow, we got chickens, we got goats. My daughter-in-law makes cheese and yogurt and you name it, she makes it anyway. We got the real farm life. You know, like Safeway could fall off the planet of the earth and we would still survive out here, right? So
Right.
we've got that kind of setup going here. So we're pretty busy, you know, like our day starts, you know, at about 5 o'clock every morning, and our kids have to get ready for school and there's chores to do before they go to school. So I imagine further on in life they'll have some sense of responsibility, and having this kind of life instills that. Anyway, I sure appreciate the invite to join you all, and I think I have to go warm up the truck now.
All right. Well, yeah, enjoy your day there being great, and really appreciate you joining us and being on here.
Okay, why, Leland, thank you for listening. Why?
Way.
Right.
Wait.
So I think for me, it's kind of surreal. My son, he's like 6'5", right? Like tall. He's a tall boy. He's in his early 20s, and watching him come through the doors in the hospital, and he's kind of, you know, lumbering towards us, and it's kind of like, holy smokes, eh? Because she, his partner Brittany had a little bit of a hard labor, but I think it was pretty cool watching my son you know, spent a lot of time with my dad, uh, becoming a father. And it was, yeah, it was, just knowing the kind of person he is, the kind soul that he has, and the thoughtfulness that, he kind of looks at the world, in that way. A real old soul. Him to become a father, I could see the pride in his eyes, and you know, just trying to reassure him that everything was going to be okay, and kind of taking the time to just breathe through all of those moments where it's like, this is really happening. When the baby was being born, and then after the baby was born, it was pretty special. There was some things that went on, so they stayed in the hospital for a couple of weeks after the baby was born. His name is Stetson, and uh, just really not knowing, uh, kind of how things were gonna go for the baby. It wasn't eating, and they had to put an IV in him and feed him that way, and try to, I don't know, stabilize his. They said stretching his stomach, which, you know, he's a big boy already. So I think it was pretty, just, moments of pride. And you heard my dad talk about uh, the family connections that we try to maintain. And I don't know, it's not such a small nuclear family kind of outlook. Our families really uh, stay together. Uh, the parents and the children and especially the grandchildren uh, have really, like, the large extended first cousins or brothers and sisters, so the families do really try to maintain a kind of a tight bond. And I think that's a consequence of what you heard my dad talking about, survival on the land, without the the industrial agriculture, or any of the industrial world there to do it for you. So we had to rely on each other for just living, just surviving. And I think those values continue to be carried on through our communities, our families, so that I think that's one of the strengths of our people, is the family bonds that we have. And it speaks to even pre-colonial governance structures around the kinship ties between not just the families in the community, but the multiple communities within our nation. And you know the imaginary Canadian US border, our language and our people. Like I said, my grandma comes from Washington, and she's a Insilkjin speaking person. So we are one nation, one tribe. We have the same cultural practices, and it's just different areas that we were able to move freely between. This Canadian construct is, and the establishment of reserves have really restricted our it's obstructed our ability to live freely within our own territory, our own nation state, if you will. And those are some of the things that create conflict for us is that colonial policy and the systems that are in place that don't allow us to fully express our cultural practices. So
Well, and live the way that your people have lived for centuries, right? That,
yeah, I
you know,
think the evidence goes back 12,000 years here.
right. So 12,000 years of living a certain way, learning how to survive, learning how to work and govern without, you know, having to write it down and all that, but finding a way as community, as family, establishing your own ways of living. I remember you sharing that you would move with the seasons, you'd move with the food. I mean, there's ways that again, for 12,000 years, a certain way of doing things, and then having all of that changed all of a sudden and a new structure imposed on that system that doesn't respect the way that, you know, your people have lived. And like you're saying, imaginary borders put in place that don't respect your people's borders that have existed, or not necessarily borders, I guess you would call them, but just the way that you have
Uh,
decided.
Borders is a, borders is a good word. Limitations or
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I could completely understand how that could create a lot of um
Well, it creates
rupture.
it creates uncertainty because it puts people in stress.
Sure.
It creates a major uncertainty.
I mean, even the simple thing you shared with me around where, you know, again, seasonally you would move, depending, I guess, maybe on the band, but you would want to be near water, for example, given how important that is. There'd be a lot of people that want to be near the water and have access to the water. And yet, if I look at the, you know, reserves just here where I live on the North Shore, a lot of them are cut off. They don't have direct access to the water. So again, that could create a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, yeah, 100%. It wasn't happenstance though. Um, if you look at the establishment of the reserves and how the borders or the boundaries were augmented 3 or 4 times, the very first time borders were established, uh, they followed the geographical kind of indicators. So creeks, lakes,
Mm-hmm.
rivers,
Mm-hmm.
mountain kind of ridges, and then they wanted to go north and south. They straighten the lines out, and you know, the reserve system is not our system. You know, we identify ourselves as the Ilk people. The early anthropologists, you know, again misunderstood, or we misunderstood the questions that were being asked. Uh, the early written accounts of our people say that we're Okanagan, or otherwise known as Sukanakan. Um, so, and then in the government's eyes, the Indians, that are further protections under Section 35 in the Constitution. So, there's I don't know how many labels you want to put on us, but we're Syilx people. We speak in Syilxin, and yeah, there's Skaluk people. Skaluk is a reference to having a dream and dreamed of the land. We have a word in our language, ace, which means to dream, and timhulauch, it has to do with the spinning earth and the dirt. So our people had a lot of knowledge, like universally, about how our relationship was with the land, the earth, and the stars and the sun, and I mean, in our language, that word timhulach, we already knew that the earth was spinning. It talks about the spinning dirt, and the place of, you know, all the where all the life forms kind of live. That's really what that word says, and it's our word for the world. And you know, we can see those words being used way back in the 1700s, you know, in the early 1800s in our research. So it's kind of cool, but it's also, you know, it it's kind of you know, it's unfortunate our situation today where um you know, maybe we can't even drink the water out of the river and the creeks anymore because they're so polluted. And then our kids are gonna, you know, have a harder time than we are because of that. So we're always trying to make things better in that way, you know, so that if at least if people are a little bit more aware of you know, just the basics for being healthy, you know, all the other stuff kind of doesn't matter if we can't give our kids, you know, at least a chance at a better future.
Clean water.
Clean water, clean air, good food, healthy, clean food, you know. I think that's that's the prayers, right? Like bringing the salmon home is it's the prayers that, you know, the salmon make it all the way back up to where they were rightfully belong.
Yeah, it's you know the work that you're doing is just trying to get it back the way it was.
Some of the work, definitely through
Yeah,
ceremony and through, you know, collaboration and partnerships and, you know,
Edu
trying to bring the best forward, right?
education. Yeah,
Education and application,
yeah,
and creating space for our own, like our knowledge, we, you know, our science applications from our way of looking at the relationship with the world and the environment around us. So, you know, I'm hopeful that, you know, think the things that we do make a difference.
well, I know you even just that one example you shared with me, and you know, I'll quickly say there's 30 things I've written down that we could that I wanted to talk about and ask based on our previous conversations, and you know, there's obviously so much we can do this again, hopefully, if you'd like. You know,
Definitely.
there's just so much, right? And there's so much education and awareness that you and your dad and family have shared with me. You guys have taken me into your home. You know, I've met a lot of your family there, and just right up front, I mean, I got an experience of it, and I think people listening here just how important family is, and how important our land is, and you know, values, right? And so yeah, we're not going to get to all of this. That's for sure. You wanted to say a couple of things then. One of which being, you know, the work that you have done to bring the salmon back. You know, I remember being up there and you took me to the creek there and got to see all of them coming back. But the work it took to educate and realize how many downstream effects had been artificially implemented that had disrupted the salmon, but the work had started to bring it back. So I wanted to obviously hugely commend you for that, and then also just point out the shirt that you had shared too, and the story behind that.
Yeah, that guy on my shirt was the last salmon chief before they built the dams in the Columbia River that blocked salmon. His name was Kinkanachwa. I got an older cousin that carries that name. And you know, I think it's not me per se that has done the work, but it's me being a part of, you know, the part of the work that is being done. You know, the loss of the salmon had a major impact in our living. Uh, 60 to 80%, some high as 80% of our diet was salmon historically, and to have that kind of lifeline disrupted, obstructed, and the damage that it's caused has been, insurmountable. I don't know if you could, put a punitive amount of damage in terms of that loss and that infringement on our rights to have access to our traditional foods. So, in saying that, it starts with leadership. There's always been the spiritual, cultural, and political leadership that our people have had. We live, we live in a time where everything kind of affects our rights, continues to, have impacts on our rights as sovereign people and as Indigenous people, as Indian people in Canada, and I think it's really been a massive undertaking for the last 40 years, 50 years, but even prior to that, the ceremonies that happened before the dams were built, you know the the kind of the recognition ceremonies, the ceremony of tears that happens, that happened when the salmon didn't come back, and just I don't think there's ever been a time where we didn't long for the salmon or pray for the salmon, to come back into the northern territories where they spawn and have babies, and to come home. So it's been a a legacy project, if you will, to bring them home, and just to be part of that is has been a has been a real honor, and to help inform that process and help facilitate that process, you know, all of those things that we can do together collectively, it just strengthens our ability to make a difference. So I definitely, don't want to take credit, but I am proud of the achievements that our nation and our tribe has made. And in the Okanagan, we've successfully had the return of salmon into the Okanagan, tributary of the Columbia, but we're continuing to work on, you know, making that a reality in the rest of the Columbia River. So I
Right.
just want to say that all the people working in that arena, in those initiatives, on those area, on those hypothesis, on the research, and all everything that people are doing within the Columbia to help salmon, is it's not for us, it's for the salmon, it's for the future, and it's for all things that benefit from the salmon, and there's no real other reward than to have, the salmon back and take on that responsibility to give the life back to the land and to the people, right? So um so many benefits from salmon, coming home. So one of my boys just woke up here. Want to come and say hi?
Yeah, I've got my little one who woke up. It's right here too, and Alain's had his in the room for a while.
They say
Way,
Hi.
why.
way.
Why?
Hi.
Oh,
They both got here. My boys. You guys go wash up.
Were you up all night?
No, I just wash up and brush your teeth, boys. Okay, hurry up.
well, thanks, Chad. I mean, all said like a true leader. Um, and I can share a lot too of just my experience and learning around the salmon piece, which again is one of the 30 things on here. The I guess I want to bring it back to just for right now, being a dad. And Well, just even what you shared there, and just in terms of how important family is in your lineage, and as Alan was sharing too, just you know, I'm starting to realize that for my own self about how little I knew about my family story and just the names and where they came from and what their land was and what they experienced. Because yeah, I mean, you know this already, how all of that culminates into who we are, whether we know it or not. And, me even just realizing for the first time this year in my life at 46 that there's intergenerational trauma that exists in me or has existed in me because of what's happened in the past. And my work to be able to become aware of that and to process that and then make sure that I don't pass that on as a dad. And I know you've done an incredible amount of work that, whatever, we don't have to go into all of it, but I know just that there's an incredible amount that you've experienced, your people have experienced and are experiencing. And, maybe just could you share a little bit, just, yeah, as a dad, now as a granddad, um, yeah, what's your journey been?
Well, I'll be the first to admit that I made mistakes as a dad. That I didn't, I didn't know how to be a dad. I had to learn as I went, and I definitely made a lot of mistakes, and I continue to reach out to my children and still try to have better communication. Uh, Being a young rodeo cowboy, I was gone. I separated from my first two children's mother, and then, had another child and separated again. And so there's been some family breakdown in that regard. So uh, I by far am not the perfect dad, and you know, uh, I've always tried to make amends and be honest with my children in terms of, you know, just not knowing uh, what I needed and how that affected them. And I'm just always open with them, trying to not just talk to them, about my life and their lives, and all the effects of that, but just always trying to create some safe space for them. If they're having a bad day, or if they get triggered about something, and they want to reach out, they want to come down and visit or whatever, it's I've really learned a lot in the last 5 years around grace, I guess. Having grace and
Mm.
patience, and really kind of reevaluating my life, and how just realizing how important it is for them to be in my life, and always, always expressing how much I love them and what they mean to me. So uh, I do want to say that for sure, that the values that we share with them and how they shape the world, is we always hope that they can have a better life than we have. So in saying that, try not to be angry with the world and what's happened with the residential school, with the major changes, and how our people were dealt with in Canada and in the US. Um, really try not to carry that anger, and displace that in our families. So, I think it's very challenging to overcome that, and to not let that create depression, or any uh, unnecessary violence. Because you know you want justice, right? You want there to be uh, a sense of restitution in some way that some unspeakable things have happened to our people. The beatings just for talking the language, the cutting of hair, and that continues. That kind of racism continues today. And you know maybe people don't want to talk about it, but it's alive. That racism still exists, and it's very apparent in terms of how things are being done, even in today's world. So it's it's not a legacy that I want to be part of, but it definitely affects us. Our kids uh continue to get teased about having long hair. And it's like, how do you still ask them to be proud of who they are while they're being ridiculed, just for
Mm.
being who they are. It's it makes them, question their identity and how they can, just feel good about themselves. They'll have some self-esteem, and they're awesome. Other than, my little guy here, he was having a hard time, and I told him, well, you can be good medicine or you can be bad medicine. The choice is yours. And he went over to his mom and he said, uh, Chad said that I'm good medicine. So, he's got a choice to make too, right? So, I think those are moments where, you know, you can you can let them start to become their own people, and try to, be some positive light in the world, right? Because they're innocent. Our kids are innocent, and they shouldn't face that kind of hardship. So they need to learn about it. They need to recognize what the truth is, and still find a way to be resilient and to be uh, filled with pride, have some peace in their heart and in their mind, and you know, like everybody else, find some happiness. So that's
Mm.
what we hope for and pray for.
Well, appreciate you sharing that, man. And I mean, I know there's so much more there. You've even just shared a little bit more with me, even what was that, maybe last week in our chat. How have you done that? Like, even just, anytime I think about it, when you share it, when I've heard about it, when I've been up there with you, it's pretty easy to get upset. It's pretty easy to get triggered. It's pretty easy to get sad. It's pretty easy to get angry. Um, for anyone that really wants to understand some of these things and what's happened. How have you processed it? How have you gotten through it? How have you gotten to where you are now?
I think, I don't know, I think about how I grew up. I was born really small, and I had lots of aunties and uncles that kind of babied me a little bit, gave me an ability to adapt, in kind of multiple situations, living situations, or uh, I felt cared for as a little guy, and through my life, yeah, I experimented with alcohol and that. I quit. Um, I quit drinking and all that other stuff when I was 21. So that's 27 years of sobriety, and I think that's helped a little bit, having an outlook like that. But my dad would take us away from the bright lights in the town and all the noise, and he would take us out on the land, and you know he would say, "Okay, well, you guys are starting to become young men. You guys got to pack your own gear, right? Bring your sleeping bags, bring your food and whatnot." And being young, we just wanted to go, 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 and maybe we wouldn't bring everything we needed. We thought somebody else was gonna do it. So, having those early lessons on hardship, being cold, being wet, being hungry out in the mountains, it really provided me with a sense of value and appreciation and self-responsibility. And I think looking at uh, the dynamics around colonization and the trauma, I went through trauma treatment a few, maybe 15 years ago or almost 20 years ago now, and I learned a lot about myself and how not to project my issues onto other people. Uh, there was some, there was a person in there, and I was upset, and by me being upset, my behaviors created a real trigger for this person who was bipolar, and they just started breaking down, crying and screaming and hollering, and I was totally unaware about how my actions were causing that for somebody else, because it wasn't direct, it was indirect. And it made me look at the world in a different way at that time about those things that I was unaware of, and how the people around me um, have their own trauma, have their own histories, have their own issues, and that I don't have to carry that, but I also have to just be mindful of how that might affect them. So really creating, I think, that awareness and not carrying that forward, not blaming others, for my feelings, I think was probably the greatest lesson that I learned through treatment. And I think another thing is riding bulls in a competitive nature, getting on 100 bulls, 110 bulls a year, for 20 years, uh, taking those kind of risks, life and death kind of risks, it really makes you, you know, realize how precious life is and how it can be gone so quickly. So, I
Mm.
always that was kind of one of the things that broke my heart too. I had a little cousin who got stepped on and killed. He was 18, and both stepped on his ribs, and one of his broken ribs went through his heart, and he he didn't make it. So you guys can't go on the TV. These guys are trying to get on TV here.
Yeah. I've I've got my little one here doing some coloring. Well, Chad, yeah, again, I appreciate all that you shared there. And you also shared that story about your cousin with me when we talked to last, and also the work that you did with that too, right? Because you felt a lot of maybe guilt or responsibility. He
Yeah.
was you were very close to him, but you were able to process and get through that experience as well, right?
Well, I had help. I was what they called disturbed for 6 months. I don't know the terminology, but that's what they said, the psychologists and whatnot. Just because I was so sad, I was really hurt by what happened, and they called it survivor's guilt. I did feel responsible, and going through rapid eye therapy. It's just a technique that they use to help process trauma. I think that was a saving grace for me to be able to be okay with me being sad about what happened and losing my little brother. I think that I don't think I could have done that without that kind of help, and I I do try to practice my own spiritual well-being through, morning swims and cold water and sweat lodge and ceremony and prayers and smudging and all that stuff. But, you know, I, I couldn't, I couldn't have done that by myself. Having people share with me philosophy and techniques and, beliefs. I think all those things coming together allowed me to open my mind and my heart to those different methods of healing. So, I really appreciate um, the people who continue to believe that, um, that they that help heal really save lives. It really does make a difference. So, thank you to all those people that are out there doing that kind of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alain is one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, man, chiropractors. I don't know if I could have made it through 25 years of riding bulls without a chiropractor.
Yeah, right.
And landing on my head so much, and snap, crackle, pop.
There you go.
Um, yeah, Chad, I wrote down some notes in terms of just what you shared there. Not everyone's going to be able to ride bulls to be able to help help to build the resilience and courage and everything that you've built because of that. But all the other things I heard around just how much support you got and from family, from people that know how to help others heal, and how cared for you said that you felt and how loved the surroundings that you've created for yourself or being put yourself into and grew up in terms of just this support and this love and this care. It's huge, right? I mean, I know for myself too that I've had not nearly what you've gone through, and just in my own experience, just how important it was to get help because sometimes guys specifically can get kind of lone wolfish and be like, I got this. I was just telling the story yesterday about how I tore apart my kitchen one time because we were renovating it, but all the people were coming the next day to do it. We got it from IKEA, and they send like 6 guys, and they all come and they do it in one day. That part's cool, but I thought I could dismantle the whole thing in the day before, and I just got way over my head. And I realized I needed some help to realize that, oh shoot, I need some help. I'm not going to get this done in time. But guys, I don't know, for whatever reason, sometimes that's hard for us. But what I heard also in there that you were very open, like that, you were open to get the help also.
Yeah, so we have a philosophy around like the power for healing yourself comes from within.
Hmm.
And a lot of times I find myself being critical of what other people are saying or their practices or whatnot, but taking a step back and trying to internalize that conversation to say, you know, that what they're saying, I have to kind of quiet the critic in my mind about what these people, whoever it might be, are trying to either help me or say or share, so that internally, um, you can visualize and you can kind of manifest, what 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 you need. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we have those internal conversations in front of, eh, or behind your eyelids when you close your eyes and you're talking to yourself and you're thinking, it's like you actually have to open those avenues to accept that kind of healing help or not. Those critics really create blockages, to what's possible. So internally and externally. The stories that we tell ourselves, are sometimes not the truth. When there's the gossip or the toxicity that exists, especially, you know, on social media where it's not face to face, right? Like it's not in the right context a lot of times, and a lot of misinformation that goes out is you know it it's hurtful. So we're starting to create these barriers in within our own way of thinking and doing things because of that. So
Yeah, I mean that's a whole other thing, The the I mean, you were sharing that example with me too around how we're creating these potential structures that disconnect us not only from ourselves but from each other. Like how this sort of lack of empathy engine that we've created where you are disconnected from someone on the other side there, and you'd shared that video you'd watched around um it was like Pete, what was that one again?
like the
Pizza.
psychopath,
Yeah.
the psychology of psychopaths or something like that. I think just disconnecting from, human atrocity. There's so much hardship and trauma. Walking by a car accident not helping.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody else is gonna call 911, or somebody else is gonna help that person, and you carry on, and then you know
You get
you
not Yeah, I feel like with the amount of car crashes you can, because the algorithm will show you car crash after car crash after car crash after car crash. So you get numb to it and you get normalized to it. And then when you see one, it's like, oh, there's just another car crash. I saw a bunch on my feed today, and then you just walk by it, as you were saying, go home and have some pizza.
well,
Um,
I mean, just imagine, not even car crashes. Just think about how many times you hear a siren and you don't even think about
that there's someone's life potentially hanging,
somebody's needs help,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like just that. I've noticed that, being down in Vancouver for some of
Yeah.
that work that I used to do. So
Because
just
you'd shared this too, right? Though in our structures of large cities, you hear the sirens more often, you hear potentially the screams more often, you hear the car crashes more often, and you just given the volume of it and the volume of people, the volume of interactions and energy, you start to potentially maybe need to numb to somewhat protect yourself if you can't regulate all of that that's going on in your environment.
yeah, you don't know who people are anymore, right?
Yeah.
I think the early settlement here, uh, we have stories around a few families, like the settler families and the people from our community. Uh, there was a store down south of us here a little bit, and the owner learned and spoke our language, and would because of kind of the Indians not having money, they would trade items, like because we would make buckskin or whatever, and they would trade for food or whatnot. But learning languages and sharing and helping each other in that way. you know my dad tells us stories about people coming to stay with them for 3 weeks when they were putting up hay, you know and they would feed 30 people, for a month, and they would just kind of go back and forth, and they would help each other in that way. And it wasn't, oh, you got to pay me. Oh, it was kind of more of a camaraderie, a survival tactic back in the day, where you had to know your neighbor in case something happened, that you could help each other, right? So the life and death stuff. But I think because of the numbers of people and not knowing, you know today, not knowing your neighbor, creates uh, uncertainty in terms of not knowing if you're going to be the next victim. Some people are kind of lost in that, either addiction or anger, that they don't really care about who they're going to hurt either, right? So I think it's twofold. one is not wanting to get involved and thinking somebody else is going to do it, and then the other one is, kind of fear-based and
Hmm.
not wanting to be, at the wrong end of a gun or a knife or whatever. Look at what happened last week with that guy assaulting somebody just walking down the street. I think he assaulted 3 people and hurt 3 people just for nothing. So, things like that, you tend to want to isolate yourself from those things or insulate yourself from those things, and that doesn't create community,
No.
Right.
and I don't know. I'm not a believer of harm reduction for addictions and substance abuse. My dad created a zero tolerance policy at our house, and it was, and there was no gray lines about it. It was no drugs and alcohol. And don't come here when you're stoned or drunk, because this is a safe place, and we're gonna keep it safe for not just you, but your siblings and your nieces and nephews. So his grandkids, right? So he wanted a safe drug and alcohol-free environment, because I think that for our people has been a real hardship.
Hmm.
So he wanted to try to change the cycle of trauma that way. So I'm
Yeah.
fortunate to have some tough love for my dad.
Well, it's a great example of a, from his perspective, that was a healthy boundary he needed to establish for his family, and
Yeah,
based on what I know about you, your dad's done a phenomenal job.
yeah, he's done a lot.
Chad, I just wanted to go back to one thing you'd said there. Well, there's a lot of things, again, we could talk about. The one thing that I wanted to know a little bit more about was you'd said there's sort of a philosophy or belief within your stories and people around this inner healing. Maybe you could share a little bit more about that.
Um, so in our cultural practices, we have I don't want to call it a vision quest, but some people might know it as that, where we have stories in our and practice continue to practice today, that kind of ceremony, that kind of, it might be a rite of passage or whatever, but uh, we fast for a number of days, and we go to a place that's called Asin Chuan Chutin, and it's a place where, if you kind of break down that word, it's about chut, says yourself. So sin chu and chut, and you can hear it 2 or 3 times in that word, and it can be said that it's a place uh, to find yourself, to become yourself, to be with yourself, to heal yourself, but it's also a place to connect with yourself. And when you're out there fasting and in isolation out in the mountains, no water, no food, you you have dreams, and those dreams usually are prefaced with the connection to land and the things that are around you. And you know some people call it a spirit guide or a helper or whatever. We call it a sumich, or a helper. And those things are misunderstood, but those um those dreams or those visions that we have, uh it it's something that is inside of you. And it's kind of hard for me to explain, without being uh overly sensitive about it. It's I take a lot of the things that I've learned, not just from being on the land and through the culture, but in riding bulls. So being so extremely focused on, a life or death. You could die at any time, and taking that kind of heightened awareness and really trying to use that energy to focus on positive outcomes or focus on what's needed. Um, yeah, it's just something our old people said, is that, if we set our minds to something, it comes from within. And if that's healing sickness or, doing something, things that, you can't really explain, like these great feats of strength, right? You hear that today. People don't even think about, in most cases, how strong they are, and lifting
Mm-hmm.
up cars and helicopters to save somebody else's life. Like, how can you explain those things? But I think when you allow yourself to see things, to feel things, that that awareness of yourself, it really allows for, I don't know if it's energy or if it's medicine or what it is, but it you know it's not possible unless you believe it. If you don't believe in things that you know that it's even possible, you're more likely to kind of give up or go do something else or whatever, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that belief has to come from within. That power has to come from within, and that it's it's kind of like in our in our stories, it talks about a spark or an ember, and that is the source. And those things obviously for us come from within inside of us. So trying to keep that spark alive, especially being a dad, is it, it's really what allows us to continue to breathe. It's life is that short.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as our breath stops, that's we're done. So I think from from that, you take what you will, but um everything has to start somewhere. And I
Yeah.
say this, one of the principal laws of physics is, the theory of relativity. The things cannot solely exist on their own. They're relative to what they're next to.
Mm-hmm.
So it does matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, well, thanks, Chad. That's a lot to learn there in terms of you said that translates to the truth says yourself.
Well, yeah, you have to be able to be honest with yourself. You can't bullshit yourself.
But it's your inner truth. Like all of this is, because I really like that. I resonate with that inside out
Yeah,
approach, versus a lot of times in certain systems, it's outside in. It's
yeah,
like, oh, the solution is out there. That person has the answers, that I need to have that thing and then I'll feel better, or I need to take this whatever pill and then I'll be healthy. It's all outside in versus for you and for millennia, not centuries, my apologies, for millennia, it's been about the truth that's already inside and the dreams I heard you say inside, the spark that's inside, and ensuring that you guys have developed ways to become aware of that. Vision quest, whatever you call it. But to be able to acknowledge it, understand it, and to work with it. And, in the language that gets used a lot these days, it's, manifesting, they say,
yeah,
that which you believe.
Yeah.
that which you want, that which you need, whether that's something you want to see in this world for yourself, for your family, something you want to see for yourself in terms of healing, health. Is that would that be an accurate summary of what you've shared there?
Yeah, intrinsic values, I think those things that you are shape the world around you.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes with exercise, food, you know, we see lots of diabetes in our communities because of sugar, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that idea of self-control,
Mm-hmm.
not and relearning how to be healthy. It's pretty easy to get off on a sugar spike.
Oh yeah, that stuff's
You know?
created to form addiction.
Yeah, so it's even small things like that.
Sure.
People might not realize the damage that it's doing,
Sure.
right? To your body, to your health. But geez, I need that fix right now, right?
Yeah, whatever that is, sugar, alcohol, algorithm. Next thing in my feed, you can get addicted to obviously your feed and what's next in terms of a little fix.
Yeah. So, but that starts here, right? That
Yeah.
starts with being aware of yourself. So
Yeah.
I think all of those things, the manifestation is, and there's lots of common kind of belief systems out there
Sure.
around mastery and awareness, and that kind of getting to know oneself,
Hmm.
but
Mhm.
I don't know, there's something when you sit by a stream and you can hear the water trickling, and it's kind of magic, right? So if that's what brings you peace and calm in your mind and in your heart, what are those sounds that find you calming down and
Hmm.
exploring your thoughts and your feelings,
Hmm.
like, and not, I won't say meditation, but just being still.
Well, that's
And
what it gets called in certain circles, but you guys have a different word for it, right?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I don't know what I mean, that's just my thoughts and opinions. Maybe it's some people might think that it's a little bit out there, but you know I think that we have to really look at how we live, especially in the right relationship with water.
Yeah.
Um,
You brought that up too, just the stories of water, how important water is not just one of the elements, but the
it's
element.
yeah, I mean it's sacred, right? And it
Mhm.
provides life for all things. It uh, and when it's polluted or contaminated, all of those other things get polluted and contaminated. So,
Including ourselves.
yeah, we don't want to do that to ourselves. And that's one of the core ideologies, is that we are the land. We are not just on the land, but we're a part of it. And so that kind of shapes a lot of the ideals that we have as Seal people.
Mhm.
Yeah. And okay, well, don't get me started on water either. Um, that'd be that's a
We
whole
can
other
do
show.
better. We'll just say we can do better.
Let's just say that, yes. Well, we did say 90 minutes, and actually we started 4 minutes late, so we're button on 90 minutes. We could keep talking for another 90 minutes, I know, as you and I have done. But how do you guys feel about wrapping it up for now here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
we got
sounds good.
kids banging at the door here. So
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's got their fatherly duties here. All right. Well, Chad, yeah, I'm just grateful for you and our friendship and who you are in this world and who you are for your kids and your people there. And I look forward to more conversation. I look forward to learning more. I look forward to, you know, doing better together.
Definitely. I appreciate it. And yeah, as little steps, right? Just keep moving forward and just see the light, see the light.
Yeah, absolutely.
See it and feel it, right? This spark, this ember that we have inside of us, like just that awareness that we have that light in us and see it in others.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, really observing, what's around us and not making judgment, you know, uh, I know that it's starting to get really cold outside, and there's a lot of people that are less fortunate than we are, and that, this time of the year sometimes is really hard for people. The holidays that are coming up, and the state of living conditions or whatever, homelessness or whatever. I just want to say that, if there's a way to help, ease some of that hardship, you know, having a thought, sharing a little bit of food or warm drinks with people like that, it does make a big difference. So just want to a shout out for those people that are less fortunate, and not not to give up. Don't give up hope, and always, there's always somebody willing to help.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and big happy birthday to your dad again too.
Hey.
You guys gonna have a party for him? Or how do you
He
celebrate?
wants me to cook him some steaks, so we're gonna have some steaks later.
Nice.
We had a birthday party a couple of weeks ago, so we blended my
Oh,
mom's
yeah.
birthday and my dad's birthday together, and it was a nice family gathering. But I asked him, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" He's like, "I just want steaks." So
That was what my son wanted to for his birthday. That was just recently.
we'll light up the barbecue and have some steaks.
That's awesome.
Nice. All right, man. Well, enjoy. And yeah, thanks again for being here. And thanks
Awesome,
to you,
and
Ryan,
see you
for
guys.
hooking it all up.
Well, thanks, Alain, for making all the magic happen here and the technology and connecting
My
us all,
pleasure.
making it look good. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, have an awesome
All right,
day.
bros. Yeah.
Okay,
talk
you
to you
guys
soon.
too.
Way.
Bye. Bye.